Hi guys! Merry Christmas Eve. Today we're going to be going through all of the books that I read this year, a little reading wrap up. Let's grab all the books I've read. Okay, here's every book that I read this year. There's 18 books in total. Did I reach my goal of 40? Clearly not. However, I got in the biggest reading slump of my life, and I got out of it. So you know what? I'm proud of myself for hitting 18. So let's get into each book. Okay, the first book I read this year was Icebreaker. I finished it on the flight home from Italy. I gave this a 2 stars. I didn't like it. Well, okay. I liked the dynamic of the 2 main characters. There just wasn't much plot, if you catch my drift. There was plot, but there wasn't a lot compared to what else was in this book. It's about an ice skater and a hockey player, and the ice skating team and the hockey team have to share a rink together because one of the facilities broke down. So super interesting, like, forced proximity. I just didn't particularly like it. The next book I read this year is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. My sister recommended it to me, and I gave it 4 stars. It's about this girl who goes into town and she finds out that everyone in that town hates her sister because she goes to a coffee shop and they try to kick her out because they think she's her twin sister. Basically, her twin sister leaves behind her child that the main girl did not know about at all, and has to start taking care of her because she's a runaway bride, so she's nowhere to go except for here. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. There was one scene I didn't really like. I say this is sound weird. The peeing scene in the backyard. I'll elaborate. He lets his dog out to pee in the backyard, and he pees with his dog. Pretty weird. But other than that, I thought it was a pretty good book. The next book that I read is called In 5 Years. I purchased this when I was in Waco, I believe, and it sounded super interesting. It's basically this girl, she falls asleep in one life and wakes up 5 years in the future after her boss asks her, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And she's like, this is weird. She basically spends only 1 hour in that life that isn't hers, and she's like, this is really weird. And it's technically a romance, but I give it 3 stars. It wasn't exactly my favorite. I thought it could have gone a different way and I would have enjoyed it more. I just didn't exactly love the ending, which that's why I gave it a 3 stars. It wasn't bad, but the ending just kind of ruined it for me. I was actually really enjoying it until the ending, but it was still okay, so I gave it 3 stars. Next book I read, you've probably heard of, is The 7-Year Slip. It's super popular right now. I bought this back in March, and I gave it 5 stars. I really liked it. Basically, this girl's aunt dies, and she goes to live in her apartment that she left her, and she leaves one day, and she comes back, and she finds that the apartment is 7 years in the past, and she finds that there's a man living in her apartment. And this is while her and her aunt in the past were going on a trip together, so the apartment is just him living in it while they're gone. So she sees him and they technically live together because she has nowhere else to go. And a romance kind of spurs from that. And it was just a really beautiful story, I thought. And I really liked their dynamics together and kind of little details you can pick up when she's in the future and when she's in the past. The next book I read is P.S. I Still Love You. It's the second book in the To All the Boys I Loved Before series. I gave this 3 stars. The only reason I didn't like it as much is simply because I don't like the second movie as much. This might be spoilers, but I'm assuming you've heard of their story. She openly emotionally cheats on her boyfriend and doesn't tell him about it and doesn't tell the other boy that she has a boyfriend, and then they break up and she's like, what am I gonna do? And then they get back together. Now, do I like Laura Jean and Peter together? Yes. However, I just don't like her in this book. She's insufferable. I'm sorry. Hence why I only give 3 stars. I think the first book I gave either 4 or 5 stars just because I really like their story, but this one I just could not stand her in. The next book that I read this year is Emily Henry's Funny Story. It was her new release this year, and I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I thought the setup of why it's called Funny Story was really cute, and also just the like dynamic of her boyfriend or fiance, I think at the time. Her fiance leaves her for his childhood best friend, and they start dating, and then she has nowhere to go, and so she moves in with her ex-fiance's new girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, and they live together. I thought that was super funny. And the story itself was just super sweet, and I really liked it, so that was that book. The next book that I read is One Last Shot. This is an author that I've been following for a really long time. I followed her on YouTube Shorts, actually. She always posted about how this book was coming out, and I finally picked it up. It is the cutest thing ever. I gave it 4 stars. Basically, this girl and this guy were friends when they were younger, and this girl becomes a famous model, and they break up for some reason. And they had a marriage pact when they were 30, and the marriage pact goes off, and they have not talked in years, and he's a photographer and she is a model, and she books herself into his photography set so that she can see him one last time. So it's kind of her last hurrah to try to get to him. I really liked the dynamic of the 2 characters, and their backstory was super cute, so that is this book. The next book I read was The Rule Book. This is the same author who wrote The Cheat Sheet, which I loved that book as well, but for some reason I can't find my copy anywhere. I've never lost a book in my life, and for some reason I just can't find it anywhere. That's alright, I think I might have loaned it out and just never got it back, which is fine. Anyways, so this book is about a girl who is a sports management girl, and the guy is a football player, and it's one of the other guys on the football team from the other story, and they used to date when they were in college, and it was like a lot of miscommunication why they broke up. And she is the manager for him and his social media stuff, and so it was just a super cute dynamic, and I really liked it. I gave this book 5 stars. I give 5 stars top a lot, so don't be surprised if you hear more of those. The next book I read is Not in Love by Allie Hazelwood. Now, Allie Hazelwood, I like her books. I love all of the other ones she's written. I actually haven't read Bride, but I don't really plan to. But the other 3 that she's released, Love Hypothesis, Love Theoretically, and Love on the Brain, I loved all of those 3 books. However, when I read this one, I didn't really like it. I thought the relationship was cute, but the way he talked about her didn't sit right with me. I don't know, it was weird. And they're rivaling companies that got one bought out the other, and I don't know, their relationship wasn't cute to me, and I didn't like how he talked about her, so I gave this 2 stars. I just didn't like it. Which the first, I also forgot to mention this one, her check and mate one, the chess one, I really liked that one as well. This one I just couldn't, I don't know, I just couldn't do. But I read it, and it was just not my favorite. The next book I read is A Court of Mist and Fury. This book is a brick, and it took me months, I'm not kidding, months to read. I started it and I just could not get into it whatsoever, so I stopped reading it, and then I picked it back up when I was house sitting, and I finished it. I gave this book 3.75 stars. It's the second book in the series, and it was pretty good. I liked the introduction of, what's that guy's name? Reese? I think that's how you say it. But I don't know, it just wasn't amazing, but it wasn't bad. I liked the super climactic ending of the book, and I bought the next book. I just haven't really gotten into it. I don't know, big, thick books take me a long time to get into, so that's probably why. But that was this book. The next book I read was Assistant to the Villain. I loved this book. I read it quite quickly as well. It's basically about this girl who is walking through the forest on a walk, and she tumbles into this guy, and he pulls her to the ground and covers her mouth so she doesn't make any noise, and it's these guys who are trying to chase, not her, but the guy that she's with. And once they finally go away, she's like, oh my gosh, you're the villain of the city or the town or whatever, and he's like, yeah. And she starts talking about how she has no employment, and he's like, well, I'll give you a job. And I don't know, I just really like their dynamic. It was super cute, and I gave this book 5 stars. Moving on to the next book, Apprentice to the Villain, the second book in that series, and there's a third one coming out. I talked about it in one of my other videos where I talked about new releases, and I'm super excited for that one. But this one was also super good. I gave this one 5 stars as well. I really liked how Evie's role kind of evolved and changed in this book, and how she kind of had more of a role than she did in the last one, and I thought that was super cute, and I still love their dynamic in this one, and I'm super excited for the next one to come. On to the next book. Nothing Like the Movies, the second book to Better Than the Movies. I really enjoyed this book. Yes, it was a little sad because, this is not a spoiler, they break up and you're kind of watching them try to rekindle the flame that they once had. And I don't know, it was very real, and like, it wasn't like some fairy tale thing, which a lot of romance books are. I mean, it obviously was like a little bit because it's a romance book, but it showed like the real side of like, oh, you abandoned this person, like that's not just gonna go away, and you kind of have to live with that. I gave this book 5 stars. I really liked it, and that's that. The next book that I read was Have a Soul. It was a Regency era fae novel, and this girl, when she was younger, basically her mom gave away her soul to a fae, I think to save her life, but I'm not sure. Not the girl, like not the main girl's life, but the mom's life. But I can't remember specifically. But when the fae comes to get her soul, he gets half of it before the main girl's cousin comes in and stabs the fae in the leg, and he can't get the rest of it, and then he leaves. And he's afraid of these scissors, so she wears them around her neck all the time. And her family later on goes into the London season, and they're trying to find her cousin a husband, and there's this magical sickness. It's this whole thing, and it's super interesting. I actually really enjoyed it. I gave this book 4 stars. I don't know, it was just super interesting, and the way that the storyline went, I probably would have given this 5 stars. I'm gonna be so honest, I just did not like the last page. Like the last sentence on the last page just like ruined it. I don't know if I would have given it 5 stars even if that was changed. I don't know. It was really good though. I do definitely recommend this. The next book that I read was Collide. It's basically about this hockey player and a psychology student, and she has to do her graduate school application, and her mentor assigns her to do hockey even though she has a bad past with hockey because her dad was a hockey player and kind of neglected her family and her specifically. So when she's assigned hockey, she's like, ew, she really doesn't like the guy. And I just thought it was a cute like dynamic, kind of like a, not enemies, but like strangers that don't really like each other to lovers kind of thing. I don't know, it was super cute. I gave this book 4 stars, and that was that book. After that, I read Spectacular, which is the Caraval 3.5 novel. It's super skinny. It's kind of like when they have Christmas special episodes on TV shows. It was like that, but for this book. It was cute, but the storyline was a little weird. Like, I don't know. The vibes were there, and I really liked the pictures. There's like illustrations on the pages, but I don't know, there was like the plot of it was weird, but it was still kind of cute. I don't know. I think you should read it. I feel a little late, but I think you should read it. I gave this book 4 stars. The second to last book I read this year is Phantasma. It's kind of like Caraval, but like really deadly and run by devils. And each level is about the 7 deadly sins. And she's trying to save her sister who went into this game without telling her, and so she follows her in there. And it's this whole like game, and it's 9 days, I think, something like that. But she gets help from this guy, and there's one rule in Phantasma, and it's not to fall in love or there's consequences, and that's the synopsis. It's a super interesting book, and I read it pretty fast. I stopped for a little bit because I got out of the mood for like a spooky book, but I finished it in one night. It was like 200 pages I had finished. It was so good. So I definitely do recommend this book. I gave this book 5 stars, and the last book I read this year was Naked Gulls. 1 star. I'm sorry. It was about this dream that this guy had. I couldn't tell you what actually happens in this book at all. I'm gonna be honest, there's some seagulls that smoke cigarettes. But maybe try it for yourself. If that sounds, it's based off of a dream he had that he wrote into a book. So if that sounds interesting to you, check it out. But I unfortunately did not enjoy this, so. And that was the last book I read this year. I read in total 18, like I said at the beginning. I hope you enjoyed watching me go through all the books I read this year, and also watching my Vlogmas series this year, as there's only one day left, and it'll be on the 26th. I hope you enjoyed. Bye, guys!